Boom! And we're live. We're live. Welcome everyone to the first ever StreamAid podcast, live on video. And there's with us we have our friends May King and Nick Luby. Nick Luby is driving the machine today, so any technical errors, they're completely down to him. And our guest this week is the fabulous, he's a long-time friend of mine actually, a gentleman by the name of Chris Whitaker. And Chris has come on the podcast to talk about, I don't know why I'm calling this a podcast, it's video. It's not a podcast, is it?
Right. Oh, okay.
It's a video, it's a vlog podcast thing. But anyway.
Oh, that might be the different. Okay, we'll talk about that afterwards.
Or it's the podcast on video. That would be it, wouldn't it?
Oh, right, okay.
It's the podcast on video. It's the first of its kind anyway. So
it's a cracking start, either way.
It's not bad, is it? I thought we'd... So anyway, but Chris, we're going to talk about sport with you, okay? And sustainability in sport. And you are the key man to talk to us about this, because just tell everybody what it is you do.
So I am chair of the management board at the British Association for Sustainable Sport, or BASIS. So we look after, we bring together sport and sustainability.
And that's right the way across. That's every sport. Is that right?
It is, yep. So from professional to recreational or grassroots, from the biggest to the smallest, so Premier League clubs down to your local football team.
Fantastic. And so, I mean, and is that this is just for the UK?
It is, yeah. Although we have a lot of alliances, if you like, tends to be Commonwealth countries because of the kind of UK.
Right.
Like, so Australia, New Zealand, Canada, we have sort of like-minded associations there that we team up with. And in fact, the US has a really big organization called the Green Sports Alliance, which we sort of founded at the same time as them and have very close ties with them.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask you whether there are they have this sort of thing in other countries. So yeah, I mean, are they're forming all the time, I take it, around the world, are they?
Yeah, I would say we were probably outliers because we started up in 2010, 11. And at that time, there weren't these kinds of, it's a trade body, I suppose, in its most basic form.
Right.
There weren't any around then. And as I say, Green Sports Alliance were probably, we were very close. Either of us were into the space first, as it were. But we were talking to them right at the beginning. So
okay. Good stuff. Now, I've known you for a long time. You know May King, and now you know Nick as well. But I mean, all that time that I've known you, Chris, you've always had a massive passion for sport. I mean, and I believe, sadly, you're a Chelsea fan. Is that right?
Yeah, positively. Yeah, sadly, but only on this last Saturday when Pep managed to get one over us.
But. I mean, you're very, you've always been very passionate about sport, but I mean, and as you've pointed out to me in the past, I mean, it's got sport's got a massive role to play in helping us solve our kind of environmental challenges. And I think that it's kind of important that we address that. And so, I mean, what is more important to you these days? I mean, are you more interested in sport or saving the environment? I mean, what's the balance there?
That's a hell of a question. So I don't think I can really put one or the other in front of them. Together, they are what I'm interested in. Okay?
Right.
And I genuinely believe sport can help. We're not going to solve the problem, but we can help facilitate. And sport plays a huge role in society at a whole number of levels. So I think we can help facilitate the debate within, and obviously, the deliverers of sport have have the capacity and certainly do have to change. So that's where sport can, but we can't solve the problems, but we can certainly help society take the right route towards solving it.
Now, Chris, I'm really glad you answered that question in the way that you did, because I've been privy to some of the work that BASIS have done, and I was also helping to promote some of the stuff that the British Association for Sustainability in Sport have been doing. And one of the incredible webinars that I listened to was by the Royal Yachting Association, because the word sustainability, it is huge, it is overwhelming. How does a Premiership club, how does a cricket club, how does the local volleyball team start when it comes to sustainability? And I was really encouraged by what the RYA talked about, because they had a big roadmap, but they also talked about starting small by not allowing it to overwhelm them. Could you talk, do you remember that webinar? Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the main points that they brought up?
Yeah, I mean, yachting is an interesting sport because and certainly they see a lot of the damage caused by pollution, at first hand, because it affects their sport. Who wants to sail around in thousands of discarded plastic bottles and fishing nets and all the rest?
Once around the plastic island.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's their next race.
That's the next race.
Yeah, so they, as you say, they actually launched it's called the Green and Blue. That's which, if you think, is a nice title, which is their strategy towards changing it. So they're the bits that they can control, and then they're the bits that they can't, obviously. So the bits that they control are the events that they put on, and making sure that there's no extra plastic pollution, for example, generated by those events, and carbon emissions, and so on. The stuff they can't control, obviously, is what society is doing beyond that point. But they can highlight the fact that if you want to swim in an ocean that's clean, take your rubbish home with you, kind of thing. And the starting small, is around again, where they've got the controllables of the associated yacht clubs that work with them, and getting the messaging out there, which I think all national governing bodies have a responsibility for, is to, and some do it better than others, to a huge degree.
It's a massive undertaking, Chris, to take sustainability and say, right, how does it relate to sport? What's the biggest challenge, do you think, to start with?
Well, so by the inherent nature of sport, which is a competitive thing, your daily focus is how you're going to win the next match that you're going to be involved in. Okay, so like win at all costs is, if you get it, if you're at the very elite level of it, and that can often then preclude, actually thinking about how am I going to win at all costs without destroying something else. So it is a massive challenge. So what we're trying to do is to change that mindset to, if you are going to put on an event. So we sort of grew up initially through the event management side of things, okay, rather than the kind of getting involved in the putting on, the running of sport.
Right.
So the event management side was somewhere where we could kind of, it was measurable. Okay, that's the problem. That with sustainability, you've got to measure it first before you can say to people, you've got to change this or that. You've got to give them an understanding of what it is they need to change. So the event management side, food waste, carbon emissions, all the things that sort of sit around putting on a big event. So that's where we kind of started. And if you go from 2010 to 2022, there have been massive changes in the way that the sort of switched on clubs and now put on their events. it also comes down to your stadiums that you build and the way that you build them, and you try and so of course the UK has it's got an aging stock of grounds. I'm sure Keith went to a few of them when he was here. Although you'd be pleased to hear that they have changed. Although Chelsea, of course, Stamford Bridge is only an upgrade, not a rebuild. But the stadiums, and that's where the States has an advantage, because they're building a new stadium. I heard a stat once. I mean, it's incredible the amount of new stadiums that are built in the States. So they're able to kind of start from ground zero, as it were, in terms of designing the most efficient and carbon neutral type stadium that they can.
Yes.
Whereas here it's always a catch-up type thing. So if you take somewhere like Twickenham, for example, built 40, 50 years ago, it's a nightmare to run. And they can't. There's only so much they can do. But then, the new
West Ham one. What about that?
The London Stadium.
Yeah.
The one, you're thinking of Hotspur.
Sorry. Yes. Them.
Them. So they've built something that is, proclaimed as one of the most kind of energy efficient stadiums. And in fact, we did a webinar with them a few weeks ago where they kind of talked about how they went about it, and from kind of starting the project off and the rest of it.
So, I mean, is it better for us to? I mean, if you have a stadium, or if you're a sports team and you have a regular stadium, I mean, if you are going to make it the greenest possible, I mean, is it really a question of having to start from the ground up again, or is it more cost effective? I mean, can you adapt what you already have, or is it cheaper just to knock it all down and start again?
No. So that's that's now something that's kind of under debate, and so knocking it down is not necessarily the best way of reducing your emissions, for example, because of all that embedded carbon you've got in what you've already, what's already there. So adapt, and it's interesting because this is a kind of a debate that's starting now, and it's going to be more kind of work done.
Okay.
So adapting what you've got could probably be a better way of reaching that sort of net zero type of state that you want to. But I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done on that. New isn't always best, and unless, like I say, you end up with something that can't ever be adapted in any way, shape, or form. But so the London Stadium actually was an interesting one, because they did recycle a lot of what they took from the original kind of site and building and stuff that was there. They used it in the rebuilding of the stadium. So a lot of the concrete was made from, steel work was made from repurposed and upcycled steel. So there are obviously ways of doing it.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, the stadium that's local to me and over here in Indianapolis is for the Colts, and that when they moved into their new stadium, when they knocked down the old stadium, which they still haven't finished paying for, by the way, they actually managed to sell off most of it to fans. So fans got seats and bricks and pieces of, and some of the fabric that was over the dome was turned into sort of usable stuff as well. So I mean, there is that element to it of trying to keep it in the sort of chain of things. But I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the whole stadium thing, because I mean, I wanted to talk to you about you mentioned a while ago in one of our conversations that you were involved in the planning and building of a sort of a sports facility that was going to be off grid. And I mean, one of the things that we've found in our research is that whilst there is a tremendous amount of good intention to do these things, there isn't always the backing that you get from the powers that be it local authorities and governments and things like that. I mean, could you just talk us through? I mean, what was it that you tried to do, and what were the kind of pitfalls and problems that you encountered?
So this was a site that a local authority had,
Right.
that had been, I suppose, abandoned, if you like, and it was kind of, they wanted to repurpose it and turn it into a sports facility, sports field. So we partnered up with there was a local cricket club that was looking for a second ground to play at. There was a community association that we could also repurpose it for, and the sort of body that oversees sport in the UK was keen to explore the sort of possibilities of building an off-grid type pavilion.
Right.
So I worked for the national governing body of cricket then. And we were also likewise keen to do a kind of proof of concept type idea. So it was sort of the three things came together. But yeah, it was interesting. So it wasn't a virgin site as such. Okay, it was a site that had sport on it a long time ago and had a pavilion on there a long time ago, but it had been demolished. The site had been cleared. They didn't have any records about what actually had been there before. Okay, so it didn't know whether there was electricity or water or sewage on the site. So we had to do all that kind of investigative work. So trying the off-grid thing was interesting. So I suppose what you learned is that no matter what you think about, I'm going to kind of come up with this project that's going to be the sort of be all and end all, there will be so many things in the way of trying to achieve that. And so the first thing was that we actually then discovered there wasn't electricity on the site.
Okay.
Nobody could find the water, and the sewage. Again, there was no discernible way. So we did all the kind of heat mapping and
So it was a field, basically.
it was, yeah, which kind of suited our purposes, which we were keen on. So we then started looking at what the building should look like. What's going to be the most cost neutral way of building this thing? Is it going to be a brick built, standard bricks and mortar type thing, or is it going to be something made off site and brought to site? And what were the carbon emissions? So along every process, we did a full kind of reporting and analysis of what was the best option. So, and you had to bear in mind cost as well, because there was a budget, and you had to work the budget. So the outcome was always going to be, what could we deliver for that budget? It wasn't necessarily going to be the most perfect, the most perfectly sustainable off-grid pavilion ever. So, and then there were things like, the local bylaws and things. So one of which I've never heard of before, but if you're building something and you're within a certain distance of the main sewerage pipe, and we were, because this ground was near a main road that had sewage, you have to tap into the sewage. You can't set up your own
septic
waste processing thing. So that kind of kiboshed any idea we had of, because we were thinking of using reed beds and kind of filtration to create grey water that could then be used to. So that went out the window. So the cost then of running a pipe from that to the thing, suddenly added a whole lot of money to the budget. So that went out. The water, again, we looked at boreholes and other options, and in fact, connecting up to the grid was the cheapest option, and in fact was the most sustainable option, because drilling a borehole obviously is intensive. You've got to bring people on site. You have to use diesel kind of machinery in order to drill and blah blah blah. So in the end, the connecting up to the main water grid was the easiest option. And again with the electricity. So look, that was the off-grid bit initially. We wanted to see if there was renewable energy we could use, power it through. And because of its usage, it wasn't going to need kind of 24-hour, 365 day
Right.
a year sources of energy. So, but in the end, again, there weren't any real options to do it. So other than using a few PVs and solar panels so the PV or PU to generate hot water, and then the solar panels for electricity. Again, we had to use the grid. So all three of those areas were done. But what we were able to do was to build it. We did build it off site. So it was created and brought to the site, and that turned out to be the cheapest way, because in terms of the way it could be insulated and its footprint and all the rest. And then it was, we used solar gain to improve the heating. Don't forget, it got used mostly in the summer, so you needed actually also not just solar gain, but also reducing the amount of heat in the place. So the design of it.
And you didn't need scads of insulation or anything.
The insulation had to be two-way, as it were.
Right.
And you didn't want a box that was, heat up like an oven in summer and be like a fridge in winter. So I just learned those sorts of projects, whilst you can have the best intentions, you often can't end up with the fun. But what we did, the learning that came from it. So because everything was analysed in terms of what the best solution was, that provided a fantastic framework then for another site where you wouldn't have those restrictions where you could actually do it fully off grid.
So if somebody came to you and said, "Okay, Chris, well, look, we've got a, we would like to build an off-grid cricket pavilion or something else like that." I mean, you'd already have the learning to be able to kind of so what would be your kind of top tips for anybody wanting to build an off-grid sports facility? I mean, obviously, don't be close to sewage to the sewage.
Indeed. I think it's really just reaching out, so like you do with anything, figure out what it is that you're actually going to be used for, what the usage is, what the sort of length of usage, and footfall and traffic and all that kind of stuff, because that informs the design. The design's always going to be the key part of it.
Right.
So design, materials, and all the rest. You need to do that first, but you need to assess the site that you've got in order to check whether it's going to have the right characteristics to be able to do off-grid. And again, I think don't get completely trapped by thinking, because it's not off-grid, I'm not producing something that's sustainable. You can still produce something that's sustainable, but it has other interventions that perhaps you weren't planning in the first place.
Well, that's a good takeaway.
Yeah, I think that probably rings true for most people, that they're looking at their world and thinking, how do I make it sustainable? And you don't have to go too far and say, well, not with this old thing, not with this old stadium, or not this old building. But it sounds like there are things, if you get your mindset right, there are steps you can take that at the end of that journey, you will be more sustainable than you were before.
The mindset is absolutely, that's where it has to start. And that's kind of that's part of our work at BASIS, is the mindset of sport, and getting that people to open up their minds. We're about, I suppose our values are around authenticity, and that's the big thing, because that there are any number of charlatans, dare I say, out there pushing all kinds of what are supposedly sustainable type of interventions that aren't, and then also like trying to be a trustworthy source of information, and that's our founder was somebody who came from a scientific background. He's a zoologist originally. So we were always keen that and I hate using this phrase, but you know what I mean. The science led us. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
That's a bad thing to say these days.
I know. It's ridiculous, but it's true. So we didn't want whatever was the latest fad to be suddenly the conversation of the day. There's actually science that sits behind being sustainable.
That's great. Well,
now,
thank you.
I'm sorry,
No,
Keith. One final question, because we talked about the one end of the scale with the Premiership clubs and the international clubs and so on. But what about at the local level? What can local clubs benefit from learning from yourselves through your webinars, through StreamAid Live? What are the tiny actions that that local clubs can do to start their sustainability journey?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I did want to kind of emphasize that we're not just about the elite end of sport or professional sport, and very much, and in fact, grassroots sport has a much bigger impact than professional sport. Okay, because there are far more people playing recreational sport than there are professional sport. So, within a club environment, certainly one of the things is to make sure that your club actually adopts the mindset that Nick was talking about. So and that needs to be pursued within the club. So you're committing when they are looking at whatever it is they're doing, putting on, staging a match or running an event, that it's done from how do we do this in the most sustainable way. And some of it is unfortunately it's still dictated to them by, for example, the league they play in. Rather than having regional fixtures, they'll be playing county-wide fixtures or big areas, and that's changed where they need to be demanding, the league that they're playing, saying we need to be regionalizing, we need to be creating a structure where we're not traveling for more than 20 minutes, car sharing, the small things. There's a lot they can do. So, for example, when you're catering, make sure you local produce, buying stuff that's got low food miles, looking at the way that where your stuff is sourced from. It's kind of all there, and at basis, we work to it's a 12 principles thing, which is the kind of standard economic, social, and environmental model of sustainability. And then there's the UN's special development goals, which we cover, and food waste and carbon emissions are all part of it. There are ways you can actually do it. You can have. There's a cricket club that calls itself the first carbon neutral cricket club in the UK. I'll give you a lovely example of what they did. So they adapted a good old Land Rover to biodiesel. Okay,
right.
The way they did it, to use to go to matches on a Saturday. So that meant they could take 6 or 7 people in it, cut down the carbon footprint of people driving to matches. The way that they run their clubhouse has got ground source heat pump and that sort of stuff. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, I know, but that's all addressed because the committee sat down 5 years ago and said we want to be the greenest club around. I hate using the word green because that's not, but they said we want to be the greenest club around. How do we achieve that? Set themselves some goals.
So I guess one of the ways that anybody watching the show and sort of looking for tips and information. One of the things is that for small businesses is that they can possibly reinforce their own sort of green agenda by supporting local sports clubs for and sponsoring green initiatives and things like that would so putting it back into the community. That seems to be quite a good move for a small business to even just like you say, just converting a Land Rover into something more sustainable. It's
that is actually a great point about the small business and local community clubs, because that's just in the wider scale.
Yeah.
You want small businesses to thrive in local communities, don't you? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's
we hate the fact that all the local specialty shops are disappearing from our high street, certainly here in the UK.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, if you can link up small businesses and local sports communities, whatever
Perfect.
it is. Yeah, it is. There's a nice thread that runs through that.
That's lovely. And so, I mean, if anybody wants to find out more sort of information about all this, I mean, is it best to go through the BASIS website? I mean, can they find information about this on the website?
Yeah, indeed. So it's basis.org.uk.
All right. Okay.
And then locally in America, the Green Sports Alliance is another one to go look for.
Perfect. Well, that's great. Chris, thank you so much. Has anybody else got, Nick, anything else to add to that?
No, that's great. Nice, succinct kind of pointers, a bit of mindset shifting for all of us. Thank you, Chris.
Lovely. Well, Chris, thank you so much for putting the time aside to come talk to us as well.
No,
and yeah, I mean, it's forgive our slightly amateurish approach to the whole thing, but it's our first ever interview that we've done, and Nick is driving the button, and it's usually Dave who's pushing all the buttons there. So, but hopefully we've done you justice, and that people watching this can come out with a good plan of action. And we look forward to having you on the big day event, which we'll be doing as well. So that'll be fantastic. But thank you very much for your time, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for honouring me as the first guest.
Our inaugural guest. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Bye-bye.